That's a new thing that Zoom added. Well, semi-new, they've been doing it for a while. But.
So just a little change in how I'm going to do the introductions as I've been kind of thinking about it and reading this. I'm going to do the introductions as each one of you are presenting so that it makes sense. So there's a connection between the introduction and the face. So I'll introduce Margie and then she'll speak, and then I'll introduce Jason and he'll speak, and then Jeff. Is that okay with everyone?
Yes, you're a little soft, just FYI. Maybe it's just me.
I am.
Yeah.
Oh, sounds okay.
And do you want our cameras off until we present and come on the panel? Or, okay.
I mean, you can do whatever you're comfortable with. Okay, I'm going
How's
to
my
open.
sound now?
Sounds pretty good.
It sounds okay. I think I need to. Yeah, it's too late. Oh.
I'm going to let everyone in, and then it'll take a minute or so for my slides, and hopefully Hernan will be in.
Well, and I'm going to do an overview. So.
Okay, so if y'all want to turn off your video.
Yes, I'm parking.
Thank you. Okay, yay. Here we go. Share screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's starting to share for me.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's program. My name is Colleen Stovall. I'm the Director of Programs and Events for the Miami Center for Architecture and Design, and we're glad you're here today. Today, our talk is on housing and mobility, affordability by design. We have a few coming events. We have a great exhibit coming up, Time, Space, Existence, opening on November 11th, and it's going through the end of January here at the Miami Center for Architecture and Design. We have a Give Miami Day coming up, and we hope that you will consider Give Miami Day as one of your charitable donations on November 18th. Please silence your microphones and turn off your video. This helps with bandwidth, and we end up having a better program. If you have any questions, put them in the chat feature at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to them at the end of the program. If we don't have enough time to get to all the questions, we will do our best to have the panelists answer them, and we will send them back out to you. At the end of the event, we're going to send out a survey, a post-event survey, plus the recorded link to this program. So right now, I would like to introduce the Executive Vice President of AIA Miami and the Miami Center for Architecture and Design, Cheryl Jacobs.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. I'm just looking at the list of all our attendees at the program. I'm excited to see everybody here. We've been working on affordable housing and mobility discussions. We've been having discussions for a couple of years now, and we have an amazing committee that has been leading this effort. We have great support from several of our municipalities, but really from our county and our mayor. And we're excited to continue this process. What we want to do, besides our workshops that we've been having, we want to do a series of these luncheons to share with you the things that are going on in our community. I keep hearing that so many people don't know what we're doing in the community in terms of affordable housing, and we want to be the convener to bring all these disparate groups together to talk about what's happening. So with that, we have our three wonderful chairs of our Affordable Housing and Mobility effort through our MCAT Urban Design Committee, Sandra Suarez, Mark Marine, and Hernan Guerrero Applewhite. And I'm going to turn the program over to Hernan, who's going to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing. Hernan?
Hernan?
We had a little technical difficulty, but Hernan, I see you're there and you just have to unmute. No? Okay, hang in there, everybody, while we figure this out. Sorry about that. Hernan, you're on, but you're muted. Okay, well, we may have to, I'm not sure what the problem is. I want to make sure that, can everybody hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear
Okay,
me?
yes. So there's some sort of problem with Hernan. So maybe we can move forward with the program while he's fixing his issues. And then we can circle back around for Hernan's presentation. What do you think?
I think that sounds good. I'll stop
Okay.
sharing then.
Okay, so why don't we do that? And then Sandra, you can move forward and Hernan will figure out what your difficulty is and then we'll get you back on, okay? You can text me. All right, Sandra, you're up.
Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Housing Talk. We're going to be introducing 3 panelists today. Our first panelist is Margie Lavovick. She is Margie Lavovick Northard with Lavovick Studio. Since establishing Lavovick Studio in 1999, Margie Northard has made a positive impact on communities through resilient, conscious architecture, art, and urban design. As founding president and director of design, her studio has produced a diverse portfolio of projects, including high-rise, modular, and conventional affordable housing, large-scale parks, and commercial spaces to museums, urban interventions, and public art commissions. Her contemplative, broad-based work explores complex social, cultural, and environmental conditions within unique region-specific landscapes. Current projects include a museum sculpture garden, high-rise affordable housing, modular housing in California and Florida, a public land art project, downtown mixed-use office, and bar and hospitality renovation, and an adaptive reuse and urban design container culture park in Flagler Village. Welcome, Margie, to today's talk. And I think you'll be doing a brief presentation today on some of your work in affordable housing, correct?
Yes, thank you, Sandra, and thank you, AIA Miami, for this opportunity. And I'm looking forward to discuss these really important issues today that we're through design, affordability by design, and our approach is that, of course, that we should be designing projects that house all of us. So I'm going to talk about 4 projects that essentially approach the housing crisis with urgency, well as concrete architectural and regulatory processes solutions. So I'll frame these projects through a couple of main issues, just very specifically. One of them is site selection. Another is the cost per unit, as well as the cost and issues for the resident, for a resilient, approach, and then good design. Thank you. Next slide, please. So Our first project is the Dr. Kennedy Homes, which is our project that we finished in 2014. And very early on, it was important that this project address transit issues because of its location between Tri-Rail and downtown, as well as become a gateway project for the historic district of Sailboat Bend. Also included in this project is adaptive reuse opportunities. It's about 132 units, therefore 20% to 80% area median income resident profiles to be eligible to rent there. And this is a project with the Housing Authority of the City of Fort Lauderdale. Next slide, please. Just in general, I would say that our approach to this project was to start with a potential modular design. We actually designed it, next slide please, in concrete modular construction. But what was important is, you'll see here on the slide that it's about 10-minute walk to downtown. It's about 10-minute walk to Tri-Rail on the west. It's on Broward Boulevard, which is a key connector to the city. And our approach was, how can affordable housing be a kind of exemplary example of how to do urban planning, and how can affordability be not a bad thing, but a good thing? So next slide, please. I'll show you a few slides of just how we approached this. With the sensitivity necessary to develop this project within an historic district, there was also multiple scales that we had to look at. So what we did was we studied the existing typical house in Sailboat Bend, and took the width of that, and that became the sort of module for the unit. The single unit you see in the dark green evolves to a 2-bedroom unit in the lime green, and then a light green to the 3-bedroom unit. So when we're talking about affordable housing, in mind, we always have to contemplate efficiency. Next slide, please. You can see then how those units could become developed further into other series of modular elements, for example, balconies, window surrounds, and all of these also needed to address extreme climate challenges. And the ultimate resiliency of a project is dependent on all of those factors. Next slide, please. One thing we try to keep front and center in all of our projects is the resident. There may be children, seniors, or a young couple in their first home. And this is really important because a lot of the conversation around affordable housing tends to not reflect on the humanity of the individuals who need this and who are throughout society and part of us all. Next slide, please. Kennedy Homes ranges from 5 stories to 2 stories. It was really important for us to understand how local construction techniques, therefore keeping the costs down, could be employed to leverage a beautiful project that is a place that we would all want to live in. So well-designed architecture, another metric for affordable housing. This is how we achieved it. What did we have to do to ensure that it was affordable? Well, keeping things below 5 stories, a range from 2 to 5 stories, will assist because of the elevator and all the requirements that come with mid to high-rise construction. Next slide, please. Also important was not dismissing or understanding our connection to our roots. We were influenced by Charles McKirahan, a local architect from the 1950s, and wanting to celebrate that style, but also ensuring that we had cross ventilation and open breezeways. These were all achievable by using local crafts as well as and construction industry practices, as well as keeping the density of the units and clusters. Next slide, please. I'm going to now talk to you about South River Plaza, which is a larger project that is not built but went through DRC process. And why would this be a strategy for designing affordable housing and architecture? Well, we needed to do a certain number of units. It turns out when you do a high-rise project, the costs obviously go up. Therefore, the quantity of units was also important, as well as the imperative of looking at what the needs are in any place. Next slide, please. It's important that, and I reference just on each of these slides, by the way, I do want to give credit to our colleagues and our design partners and owners. Next slide, please. So this urban mixed-use campus was located sensibly south of the river and on a transit corridor, which meant that folks could walk to work, could walk to shops, and parking wasn't going to be a major requirement in this project. Next slide, please. An important component or element that we use in our projects is the micro unit, which we are all familiar with now. But along with that comes the challenges of, very interesting architecture. So we try to be very efficient and then think of all the components within the unit as modules within another module. So this design, it turned out, was not able to be competitive with doing modular, volumetric modular in South Florida. So what we did instead was we designed a kitchen and bathroom prefabricated module that could be site installed, completed, which accelerated the process. Next slide, please. Also, as we discussed in Kennedy Homes, another element which is really important to us is understanding where we are. And well-designed architecture, as we all know, it turns out, actually yields lower costs to the resident. Housing security is fundamental in developing and designing affordable housing. It's a strategy that can reduce the long-term costs and the rent costs, as well as the electricity bills and such. So this is using the brise soleil and having balconies that shade orientations that are on west and east facade becomes essential. Next slide, please. Another component that was helpful in reducing the costs of these projects was to develop a public-private partnership with the city where other needs are met. In this case, there was a fire rescue station and a co-op grocery store that contributed to the overall quality of life of the neighborhood in which we also were it was an important element to be a part of. Next slide, please. A project we're currently working on in the city of Miami, and that is using a very specific task force approach to the entitlement process because of its challenge to both the costs and viability of a project, as well as the diminishment of access to housing quickly because of these complex processes. This is a 12-story project that is essentially 4 stories of parking and 8 stories of residential unit, and very efficient. And I'll show you a little bit more about that. Next slide, please. It's located in Edgewater. It's an urban infill project. And I think urban infill is another area that when you're looking at site selections for your clients and owners, you think about how we can do the other type of architecture that is not the massive development. What happens though, next slide please, is that we are constrained, as you can see this green square, we're constrained by the limitations of say a 1/4 acre site, which has to have parking for affordable housing and it's not in a transit-oriented development corridor. So there are many regulatory environments that need to be advocated for change in order to ensure that you don't slow down your entitlements process to achieve the required site plan approvals. Next slide, please. Again, the utilization of the micro unit, a repetitive module where everything is stacked and is efficient and still affords someone a full kitchen and bathroom and place to sleep and live. In this case, we've also have wraparound balconies to ensure we have coverage and solar protection. Next slide, please. I'm going to the last project I will talk about is one that we're also currently working on, 2 of these actually. This is one in Los Angeles and is a high-rise volumetric modular building that is highly efficient. The entire tower is all out of modular. It's about 90% modular with about 10% conventional construction. This is a way to expedite the process of construction. It's really also increases the quality of the projects as well as reduces our carbon footprint through minimum waste production. Next slide, please. I'll go on to the next one. Thank you. So this is also located on an important transit corridor for site selection. It is a walkables area. Next slide, please. It's in the downtown Skid Row area, which many of you might be familiar with, which is the epicenter of the housing crisis in the city of Los Angeles. And so what we're doing here is developing models. This looks at how a unit is transformed into 2 units, which can be shipped to site simultaneously, is expanded across the entire project. And then what we do for common areas is we extricate or remove and therefore are using the same module. All in this case, all of the conventional portion is outside of the tower or in the basement. Next slide, please. Here you can see the unit iteration and how it evolves. Essentially, it's a product. And when designing in modular, the product then has to be very efficient. It's a steel frame chassis where components are introduced all in the factory. And in some cases, part of the outside of the facade is done in the field or it's developed from the factory. Next slide, please. The last element I do want to address is we've developed a task force approach working with council members and their staff in order to expedite the entitlement process. That is an extraordinary way to reduce costs, and then we're also working to reduce fees. So thank you so much. I'm happy to answer questions, and I look forward to listening to my colleagues.
Thank you, Margie, for sharing those exciting projects. They're really quite provocative and very, very interesting. Thank you so much. We will get back to you when we're done with the other two presentations so we can all talk again. I'm going to introduce our next presenter, which is Jason Hagopian. He's a registered architect and AIA NCARB member. He's president and founder of Nevio Architects and is a full-time resident of Fort Lauderdale. Jason is very active in his community. He currently serves on the Pride Center on the board for the Pride Center in Wilton Manors as secretary, and for the Miami Center for Architecture and Design board as president. He's also chair of the Emerging Leadership Council for AIA Miami, a board member of City of Miami Beach Design Review Board, board member of the Rensselaer Alumni Association Board, and member of the Greater Miami and the Beaches Hotel Association. Welcome, Jason. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you, Sandra. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. Give me a moment. Sandra, just let me know if you see my title screen up there.
It's showing up. I think it just we need a zooming out.
Yeah, it just took a second last time, so just
No problem. There you go.
Are we good?
Yep, I think we're good. I will go ahead and turn off my screen and my mic for you.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. As Sandra said, my name is Jason Hagopian, President, Nevio Architects. I'm just going to talk about one passion project that I was very fortunate to be a part of. And it's called the Residence at Equality Park. And I kind of subtitle it Passion and Process because this is probably followed a process unlike maybe a typical affordable housing project. Just a little bit of background. So, you know, how do you go from an idea to a reality? And as Sandra had said, I do sit on the board for Pride Center at Equality Park. We're a not-for-profit supporting LGBTQ+ people and their needs and the community. So this project particularly began actually back in 2012 when an organization called the Gay and Lesbian Elder Housing identified the need for LGBTQ+ affordable senior housing in the Great Fort Lauderdale area. And they actually reached out to the city of Wilton Manors. And coincidentally, the Pride Center has a campus in Wilton Manors. At this time, I was not on the board, but I of course knew of the Pride Center. And I'll be showing some images of our project in the background. At that point, the Pride Center spent a few years trying to figure out the possibility of perhaps providing senior housing on the campus. Now, I just want you to know the Pride Center is not in the, the core, one of the core missions of the Pride Center was not to provide housing. We're a service organization that serves the LGBTQ community, provides testing, support groups, a myriad of services, but one of them at the time, of course, was not affordable senior housing. At that time, I was hired to conduct a charrette and develop a master plan for the campus. This was basically a one-day-long meeting with about 60 different constituents, from elected officials to user groups, to figure out what to do with the campus and how to develop it. And one of the things that came out of that charrette was the desire to have affordable senior housing, to be able to provide that for the community. And within the following years, it did take a little while, design began on the residences. And I truly say this is a unique partnership because Pride Center, of course, owned the campus. Here's a picture of our campus. The only building that was existing is a small building in the center. Everything else is part of a master plan. On the left-hand side was the original thought about where our affordable housing would go at the front of the site. So we worked with CAR4. We interviewed several developers to assist. CAR4, of course, another not-for-profit organization that has a lot of experience in Dade County. This was one of their first projects in Broward County. And so then in 2019, after much design, at this point, I was actually on the board and was brought on to assist with interior design and basically act as an owner's representative, because I was the only one on the board that knew anything about architecture and design, to assist Pride Center and CAR4 in the development of this project. It's fairly unique because, as you saw, the project is on the Pride Center campus. So there is some shared uses, shared entry, shared parking lot. It made for a very unique experience, I think, for both, of course, Pride Center and CAR4, because we were a very active user. Construction began in 2019. And then in 2020, we accepted applications. There were 48 units that were built, and we received over 1,500 applications. So unfortunately, there's still a huge need in this community for affordable housing, but we're very happy that December of last year, our first residents moved in. So you can see in the background of this photo, the housing is on the left-hand side in our existing Pride Center office space, and some community spaces on the right-hand side. And I like to think that if it were not for the, I think part of our success of our project was because we didn't really know much about public housing, about affordable housing and how to build it. And we were able to, I think, really push some of the limits that may occur in more normal, common public housing or affordable housing projects, because we felt like this was, our housing project here on our campus. And we're very proud of what has been created. And I hope that we can inspire other communities to find ways to, if it's a passion project and you want to see this kind of development in your community, you don't have to be necessarily an expert at it. You do have to surround yourself with people that are familiar with this kind of project, but always present challenges and always present. We were constantly pushing the limits with this project in order to get a project that suited our community. And I think I welcome any of you to come up and see the project and what we created on our campus from a group of people that really knew nothing about this type of a project. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you,
Jason, we may need to hold you to that. Just wanted to jump in and say we may need to hold you to that invitation to come and check it out.
Well, we would love that. And just FYI, all the units are taken. So you'll have to wait to the next phase. So.
And Jason, I think did you mention that this was one of the only types of housing for LGBTQ community in Florida and maybe in the country?
Yes, well, there's certainly Los Angeles has a couple of large projects, and I do believe this is the first one here in Florida. So it holds a very personal, proud place to the Pride Center and to myself personally, which I also think when you have a passion for a project, I think it really affects the outcome.
Agree, and it shows. Thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and thank you, Jason, for that presentation. We'll come back and have a talk with all three of you. Next, for our presenters will be Jeff Hubbard, and he is FAIA, ASLA, NCARB Lead AP and Principal and Director of Planning, Landscape Architecture, and Urban Design at Brooks and Scarpa. Jeff manages a South Florida office. Mr. Hubbard also serves as an associate professor and director of the School of Architecture at Florida Atlantic University in downtown Fort Lauderdale. He holds master's degrees and licenses in both architecture and landscape architecture. Welcome, Jeff. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it and deeply honored to be here with AIA Miami and the invitation. I always say that all those things and $3 doesn't buy me a Starbucks coffee, unfortunately. But I'm happy to be here today and really talk a little bit about our work at Brooks Scarpa, in the affordability by design. So I'm really encouraged by this panel, and it's great to hear Margie and Jason. It's kind of ironic that we're all in Fort Lauderdale or doing work in Fort Lauderdale and presenting some of those today. Our offices here in Fort Lauderdale, we're by a coastal firm with both offices in Los Angeles and Fort Lauderdale. Just to talk a little bit about us, we've done over 10,000 units of housing across the country. It is a quite tremendous feat, and some of our first projects actually came online in 2000 with an affordable housing project called Cherokee Lofts. That was it was the first LEED certified multifamily project in the country as well. And so, we've been working through this for many different years, and I'm actually quite honored to see Mike O'Hare, who's our current client on a project that we're currently working on that I'll present today, the Heron, and I'm going to also talk about another project called the Nest. I don't know, there seems to be a theme there of this avian variety, but the point I guess I'll make here is these two projects, both this one in Miami Beach and the other one in Los Angeles, really, I think, come to a head and trying to promote many different aspects around the idiosyncrasy of a community, but also to try to find better ways to achieve affordability and to really celebrate high design and how we are beginning to develop those. So the first project is the Heron. It is done with the Housing Authority of the City of Miami Beach. As I mentioned, Mike O'Hare is actually on here today. It is on Normandy Isle, and it's for 20 units of senior affordable housing. We really were inspired, again, just as Margie talked about, we want to understand the community and the aspects of that. And so we were really inspired by the MIMO architecture, Miami Beach Red, other components, and thinking through that and how we begin to also pull in the architecture of the surrounding landscape and integrate it into a sense of place. Because after all, that's what we are trying to do. Is it's not always place making, but it's amplifying a sense of place through place keeping and place building. And so really we learned a lot of key lessons with the architecture that is around this particular project. And just kind of zooming in, the project's on Marseille Drive. Again, it's 20 micro units of elderly affordable housing. And we were also very inspired by the breeze block architecture of that MIMO style. And just a section kind of looking through that, but this is a simple 4-story structure. It's in the historic overlay district, which gave us several challenges to work through. We're actually not required to have parking, but we did integrate some parking into this project. And essentially all the living quarters are in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floors, as well as a community room at the upper level. And this is essential for us because we're having to really reconcile a few things. One, we're in a historic district, but also we're trying to deal with challenges around sea level rise, climate change, adaptation. We all know what happened in Hurricane Irma, and I think this was the incredible lesson from the Housing Authority is coming to this and saying, this project must operate as a resiliency hub for the individuals we are serving. And so they need to be able to stay in place and be able to live out the storm, and as well as begin to integrate it around even potentially after the storm and a lack of power. So we're integrating things like backup generators, but we're also designing this to be passively ventilated through the easterly breezes being harvested through the project and so on. And so this is just an overview looking south back at what that project looks at from Marseille Drive, an image of it from the front side along Marseille Drive. So again, even though we're not able to really pull things to the ground level for community spaces and other things, we create these kind of urban stoops, a porch where the elderly can really hang out onto that. And then it moves up to an upper roof terrace at the 4th floor. And again, you can kind of see that inspiration from MIMO architecture. And so this is a view looking at the northeastern corner of the project and that breeze block wall. And some interior views of the areas of the common spaces moving up. And so another project I'll just kind of briefly touch on today is a few years ago, the Los Angeles County came up with a homeless initiative, housing innovation challenge. It was a $4.5 million project that was put out and pitched for great ideas and collaborations amongst architects, nonprofits, and anybody that was figuring out how to create a game-changing solution to how to begin to combat the issues around homelessness in Los Angeles. And so we were actually one of the selected firms. We went ahead and worked through this, and it was based on what we called the Nest Toolkit. And what we wanted to do was develop a kit of parts. And as I mentioned, we have the Heron in Miami, the Nest Toolkit. We're developing 4 different prototypes out of that. And as Margie was mentioning about these already pre-manufactured elements, these pods, if you will, are a product-driven element. So we had 4 of them: the Blue Jay, the Dove, the Osprey, and then these shared space ones. And each one of those gave certain levels of whether it be transitional housing or more permanent housing based on those needs. And so it was a really complementary toolkit to strategize and begin to think about how do we deal with this issue of affordable housing. Our partners were the Community Corporation of Santa Monica and Plant Prefab out of Los Angeles too. And so the first thing that we did was we began to look at the ubiquitous lot structures that were in Los Angeles. And quite frankly, we have the same here in Miami, in the Miami-Maker region. But these 150-foot by 50-foot lots are pretty, again, ubiquitous. And we were looking across all the types of cities across Los Angeles County to really develop what is the best way that this prototype can fit, because what this is a product that can be rapidly deployable. Anybody can purchase it on this website, and I'll kind of get into that and that strategy. But we were looking at single lot, double lot, mid-rise, so you could stack these up to 5 stories tall. These products, they can go on mat foundations, and there's some other great aspects. And when you're starting to think about that modularity in that affordable housing market, we were looking at how it could be deployed into commercial zones, but residential zones. It could take up parking lots, infill lots, or even that mid-rise condition. And one of the things that we know is, since it's modular, it can be then modified slightly to take on certain configurations and certain characteristics of what those facade options could be for our clients and other individuals in there. And this is just kind of showing, again, some of the options and possibilities of this system, showing, again, some of the possibilities and options for the facades. And so now what we're really trying to do is Plant Prefab actually offers this. Anybody can go to their website and purchase these modules and bring them onto their site, and then begin to build out some custom features, in this case, particularly the facades, and work through that. One of the first projects that we got through this was actually looking at Mount Olive Lutheran Church. This is just an image of it. They had a need for permanent supportive housing, for transitional housing too, for homeless. And you can see on the backside there's a pretty large parking lot. Interestingly enough, Los Angeles has pretty much single family zoning across the entire landscape. They don't have a lot of higher density zoning. And so one of the challenges is kind of how do we begin to bring in densification and strategically still meet the intent of the zoning codes. I mean, this is one of the things that we need to talk about in affordable housing is policy. But here you can kind of see the plan of this. So this is actually elevated over the parking lot. This is what we affectionately called, in sending it through permitting, a 13-bedroom single family house. But it did provide 13 units of beds for folks. And so this is what it looks like from that, again, elevated over the parking. You can see the existing church in the background there on the image in the top, and into this. And I'm going to probably just bypass this video. I was going to show a quick video, but would love to discuss and talk more today. Thank you.
Are you sure you don't want to show the video?
I can
Jeff?
share it. If you want me to share it, I'll share it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Go ahead and
Okay.
share it.
Okay.
Don't forget to click those 2 little things when you share the video to share the sound.
Oh,
if there's sound.
Is it not sharing the sound? Sorry.
I don't know. I just thought I'd throw it out there.
Let me make sure I'm doing that. Yes.
Once you hit share on the
Yep.
bottom, there's 2 boxes.
Yep, I got it. 1 second. Okay, hopefully everybody can.
Become a culture that ignores people and looks the other way. Our homeless problem, especially in Los Angeles, is so large now that it's almost untenable.
Los Angeles has the highest number of unsheltered people anywhere in the country, and clearly you can see that in Skid Row.
There's a lot of suffering that goes on. If you're not ready to live in the streets, it gets pretty profound.
For those individuals who have been largely isolated and alone, beginning to try to build
solutions to homelessness can look like.
I've known Mike for a long time, and this is really our first collaboration. The name of this project is the 6 that we did for Mike, and that means that, in military terms, it means I've got your back. And really, Mike is the 6 for homeless people.
I think I was one of the first people who moved, who had keys, and I thought I was dreaming. And I came in and looked, it was empty. I was like, whose house is this? They said, yours. I got a little radio, a microwave, a crock pot. What more can you ask for?
They have everything contained in their own unit, but then we have
my breath away.
groups
Because I've been suffering for a number of years. Suffering for years. And what are you gonna expect, you know?
Breaking stereotypes of the homeless goes back to design. It says something. It says we care about you.
Design definitely can empower individual. If you ask Mike, he'll tell you that good design is part of the healing.
A little bit like Frank Sinatra, if you can do it here, you can do it anywhere. No one has a bigger homeless crisis than we do here in Skid Row.
I think it's absolutely a replicable model. All you need is the will to do it.
These are our cities. Whatever we make here, whatever buildings we build here, they're part of the larger fabric that defines our cities.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, for sharing that so much. I think this is kind of why we're here, and this kind of human aspect to the housing issue is so necessary to see, and this is what we'll be talking about today. Right before we get into our talks, we're gonna go back to Hernan and just let him go ahead and present what he was gonna present, and then we'll come back to this, Jeff and Margie and Jason. Hernan,
Actually, I was thinking, why don't we maybe just head into the panel and we can do that afterwards as a summary, because I think there's a good momentum happening with
Yes, I agree. And so I think it'd be great if we could have Margie's camera on and Jason. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for your presentations. It's just so great to hear from everyone and see your projects and all the work you've done. And really just to kind of see that video and what your projects are really impacting, right, is just kind of moving the ball forward in a sense to solve the problem that is not just a large problem in LA, which is so visible, but really across the country. And it's so interesting that all 3 of you are working in Broward and in the Fort Lauderdale area, and I think 2 of you have projects in LA. And in LA and Miami being so similar in terms of its urban plan and the 1 mile grid, it's just kind of these 2 cities that are almost kind of sister cities in a way in terms of the urban condition. I think one of the main kind of thing that we wanted to focus on today was to talk about affordability by design and how that happens. And I know that there's different kind of strategies, both on the policy side and on the construction side. And Margie and Jeff, you've both been talking about this modular prefab systems that you use to keep costs down. And I think that Jason earlier had mentioned kind of what the partnership was between Pride Center and Carrefour. And if any of one of you can kind of speak to, how those issues, basically how those strategies begin to affect affordability.
I mean, I can start just, maybe on one side of it, because for us, and I'll speak kind of as, as a board member at Pride Center. And of course, I am an architect, and I was, the master planner and did a lot of the programming and interiors of this project. I would say, for Pride Center, we had no financial capability to even imagine such a project. So I think part of it is like affordability of design. So how do you create something that is actually a wonderful piece of architecture? And the other one is, how do you actually even make something like this happen, I think. So of course, there's lots of partnership and Florida Housing, and certainly having Carrefour involved and going through a process and a funding process through the developer, of course, is all really important. And there is going to always be limitations. So we were going to build a much larger project, many more units. But by the time we got the request in, the number of units allotted for this area by Florida Housing, all we could get was 48 units to help to get funded. So this was kind of like a big blow to us initially, but we knew, 48 was better than nothing. So I think we had to be really flexible like that, but then also constantly pushing for, for something that was, we like to think, unique and high quality for the end users. And look, the project's going to cost what it's going to cost when you build it. I mean, the good thing is, between Jeffrey and Margie and myself, you have people that are strongly vested in design. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where there's really no reason, personally, I think, for these projects not to be well designed, if not designed in a superior way, to be honest with you.
I agree.
I would add to that, just in terms of, your point about the costs are what they are. So then I think architects are really good at finding solutions and also sort of communicating the priorities. So we play different roles. In some projects right now, we're advisors to a project rather than being the architect of record. We actually will come in and bring our expertise to a project. I think there's many ways we can access these issues and these challenges to find solutions. In all over the world, this is a problem specifically also here. One of the other areas that I think is really important is for us to see it as an organic, ongoing thing. There's not going to be a solution and we can move on. It requires advocacy at a whole new level. And because costs right now, for example, as we're all aware, are going up so rapidly, the numbers that one thinks one can depend on in schematic design might be quite different in construction documents. So we're developing really, really integrated project delivery projects and work very closely with the contractors and the modular vendors, or even conventional projects, just generally construction management teams and our engineering professionals, because something small when you're doing affordable housing can cause really challenging issues down the line. So early identification of cost drivers, site selection, key advocacy, these are things that really have been helpful in our projects. And also when projects have not worked out, we've had the whole NIMBYism is a big part of it. Not in my backyard as another prevailing challenge with affordable housing that requires education and sensitivity and understanding in the community. So,
and I guess one question that's just kind of coming up on this whole modular thing. What is how would you explain, I guess, the difference between modular versus conventional construction? I mean, it just kind of it's naturally, right? There's kind of always modular elements in construction.
Absolutely.
I mean, right? A CMU block is modular. 2x4 is modular.
Of course.
So what's the difference really kind of when you're talking about modular versus conventional construction?
I think prefabrication is an important distinction, and not everything is modular. But in the case of, say, a volumetric modular, where the entire unit is produced off-site in a factory-controlled environment and is assembled and delivered literally with sometimes built-in furniture. I mean, usually that's the case, but everything comes to site. So the contractor does not have to go back into the unit to do any finishing. They have to do hookups, and in the corridors and facade work. But volumetric modular is different, say, from flat pack modular, where it's a unitized module, a component that you're talking about. Or in our projects, when they're not volumetric modular, we do conventional with modular kitchens and bathrooms. So those are prefabricated elements. And I think it sounds really cool, and I think we want to get into this, but it's extremely constraining. And I think that's where it comes into the sort of factory production line idea. We don't believe we've yet reached where a high-rise modular building is going to be cost neutral, volumetric modular in Miami yet. We're testing that right now and trying to understand, because of our wind loads and our other challenges, which are different to, say, seismic. But we think that the speed to market then becomes the driver if it's cost neutral or slightly more expensive, because there's ways to save money for the client and the long-term sustainability of the residents.
Right, and I think some of your projects, like the Dr. Kennedy Homes, is at $92 a square foot, correct?
Yes.
That's impressive.
Yeah, that was quite a fun achievement. But in the end, they didn't build it modular because there was only one concrete modular vendor in Florida at the time, and they didn't feel there was enough competition. So that's also a big part of the challenging aspect to modular construction. And Jeffrey has a whole other layer that he can add to this.
Yeah, because I mean, what we always say to our clients is like, we cannot change the cost of a piece of or sheet of drywall. I mean, that is what it is. But what modular can do is be hyper efficient with the materials that we're actually producing those module units out of. And this is why I always, we try to dimension even our custom built elements, with understanding, well, what is that dimension of a 2x4? What is that dimension of, the block, the CMU block? So you're minimizing that cost of labor. It doesn't always work out like that, but within modularity, you can be so much more efficient. And I think that's a kind of 2-for, because it not only builds affordability, it builds in sustainability into what you're doing, because you're able to use every part of the materials that are in that process. And I think that's the truly innovative aspect of modularity, and seeing that in affordable housing and vectoring through affordable housing. But let's keep in mind, modularity actually started in luxury housing, especially single family, getting it into very remote locations. It's now becoming an urban tool to get more affordable housing in. But I think where architects and myself as a landscape architect, where we see innovation now happening in affordable housing is going to be through the site planning, through low impact development, like landscape as infrastructure. Landscape can no longer be decoration or ornament within our projects. It has to be a part of the infrastructure. And then on that flip side, looking at everywhere where we can save money through modular, building things off site, bringing them in, it just makes things happen a lot quicker and a lot more efficiently. And so those are the two drivers, I would say. And I would keep in mind that when we're talking about affordable housing, it's not always about how much it costs, the upfront cost per square foot, but it's also, who are we building for? I think Margie brought this up. I mean, I would bring it up again. And I know Jason's also brought this up, but these folks are spending, and sometimes 50 to 70% of their income on housing every month. And so we need to make sure that the energy efficiency on these buildings is also high end. And so when we're talking about a place, you have to understand your context, orientation. I mean, all of those free things that passive design gives us need to also be baked in, because if we're not lowering the energy building or energy bills of the folks that we have in there, I mean, that's another huge challenge that we have in these contexts.
Right. So it's all kind of, go ahead, Jason, sorry. Okay. Right. It's just a very integrated process. And one of the things that that's very interesting is kind of the relationship between this modular construction and your vendors. Jeff, could you speak a little bit to the relationship that Brooks and Scarpa has with plant prefab and what that looks like in terms of, others being able to do the same or something similar?
Yeah, so Plant Prefab it was founded by Steve Glenn. It was actually he produced the Homes for the Living Building Challenge back, and this is into the 90s up through the early 2000s. And so he was building a lot of those high-end homes. I mean, we came to him because his mission was always to move it into the affordability market. that is where we see, just like you could see Elon Musk moving from, hey, I have to do the Model Y to get to the Model 3, right? This kind of aspect, and we're now there, I think, in the markets. And so that partnership with Plant Prefab has been critical. And that's, you know, again, you can go to his website today and order all these modules. And I think that's the great thing, is it's an open source product now. You don't have to design every single aspect as the architect, but you can go there as a kit of parts, order those pieces, and then go ahead and have some of that customizable and a little more idiosyncratic elements to your architecture as you move through. But there is some challenges that we are starting to work through, and some lessons learned, especially when you're thinking about foundation, bringing it to Florida, as Margie's already indicated, the hurricane wind loading and other aspects that you're going to have to begin to think about how things are connected. It's not that it can't be done. It just needs to be, not everybody wants to be the guinea pig in those systems. And so even Steve Glenn is very interested in bringing the product to Florida. It needs to be able to be delivered across the state. And so it has to be able to operate all the way from the Keys all the way up to Tallahassee and everywhere in between, with the same kind of NOA and aspects of approvals for each one of those conditions, and nothing can be specialized, for those particular areas. It has to work in Miami-Dade County under our code, and then be able to be brought everywhere. So there's challenges.
Margie, Jason, do you have similar kind of vendors or stories with your prefab vendors, or with the modular systems that you work with?
Yes, we actually had an interesting challenge with finding high-rise residential modular, volumetric modular. There's actually very few buildings in the world that have been done that way. And so we spent some time, we went to Poland, we've been all over the world looking at factories, at very specific modular vendors to understand, what they're offering. And everyone sort of primarily has a proprietary system, which Jeff alluded to. And so we're looking also to do this sort of agnostic, system, which is not that easy to achieve in a high-rise building. A couple that we worked with, Skystone, and they were out of Poland and now and Malaysia. But what we've learned is it's not that different from sustainable design principles. If we can have a local modular vendor, say in California or in Florida, and California specifically, they don't have to increase the size of their steel frame members to accommodate shipping from overseas. So suddenly you're saving on transportation, and you're saving on, overall heavy material production, right? So your costs can come down. So I think as this gets more competitive, we're working with modular vendor consultants as well. We think that we can get to a point where it might be less expensive, but right now it's still about the same price in terms of the overall cost per square foot. And I'm talking about 90% modular building and 10% conventional. So the conventional actually occupies 50% of the price. So the scales are quite at variance still, because contractors are not as familiar with, and we're working with a couple of different large contractors, they're not as familiar with where the dividing line is between, say, the subs and all the electrical utility requirements. And so you often get double pricing. So this is another area that has to be fleshed out and figured out to make it very efficient. And we're looking to do models, not just buildings. Our main client is interested in developing models for this. So we're looking at scalable models and projects that can really be replicable, and others can use the information rather than seeing it as proprietary.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that kind of like the hiccup is still in the part of the contractor, right? In other words, that's still kind of the area that has to be worked out, because they're the ones that hesitate the most, right? They don't like surprises, they don't like unknowns, and that's kind of where they always bump up the cost, right? And so getting them on board, maybe that's something, maybe that's a next step in terms of having them understand how to integrate it really, and for it to be a known, and for it to not be a surprise. Would help bring down the cost.
I just want to add also, since it's mostly Miami oriented, that's still out. We don't know yet if volumetric modular makes sense here, but I do think that there's other ways to do really efficient design, as we've been all saying. And I think that that's an important point to stress. Don't feel like because you're not working in LA that you can't make a huge impact on this issue. Sorry,
And I would
Hernan, please
say,
go ahead.
just to kind of echo that, Margie, it's just I would say the entire process, right? Even the developer and any new idea across any market sector, including affordable housing, has to be embraced by the whole team for it to be, somebody has to take the initiative. The architect and the designer, we're a good start, but we also don't pay for the construction. We don't buy typically, we don't buy the project site, so we can push, that's what we can do. We can offer the support, the evidence, the expertise, but it takes, the construction and the developer, they hold a lot of the cards, but the impossible can be possible, which I think we all have to believe. And when you see these amazing projects, those start with us as a design, but we don't necessarily make it happen, and we need people on our side to make it happen. So when Jeffrey creates this pink housing project,
you need a champion.
Yes.
And I wanted to take a question from the chat. George had asked, he said, amazing work, everyone. Reynaldo Borges also says, amazing work. Well done to all panelists. Super important to build affordable housing with dignity and great design. George has a question. He said, can each of the speakers touch on specific, can each of the speakers touch on specific land use and funding rules that have either constrained or encouraged better affordable housing design? So specific land use and funding rules that have either constrained or encouraged.
Land use and funding, was that the second question?
Yes, land use and funding rules, yes.
Yeah, I can tell you one of the things that we first learned was policy, and the way the land use works is instrumental in getting these things accomplished, and especially in Los Angeles County, but here in Fort Lauderdale and Florida in general. And just to some of those key points, I mean, we actually, Brooke Scarpa, Larry, and Angie went together and worked with several others to develop what was called the Livable Places nonprofit, and that nonprofit developed the LA Townhome Ordinance, which then became known as the Small Lot Ordinance, which really allowed for all these projects you see that are being built by a lot of architects. These kind of missing middle kind of housing projects throughout LA are really spearheaded because of that ability to change the code. And that was a land use regulation. I always, and I said this the other issue I have is when we go into communities and we talk to the mayors or commissioners, we always ask them and then try to identify what neighborhoods do you like in your city. And it's always interesting. They talk about the 100-year-old neighborhoods that have accessory dwelling units, have a mix and a collection of multifamily housing on one block and a single family housing in the same block working together with ADUs. And to me, those are illegal based on current modern codes in a lot of our communities. And in some cases, like even in Fort Lauderdale, and I'll pick on Fort Lauderdale because we're talking to AI in Miami today, but you can't put an AHU on a property unless it's 10,000 square feet. Well, how many urban lots are 10,000 square feet? Most of them are 5,000 or less, and so it's kind of these rules that are baked in that really need to change. And so
I totally agree. I know that you brought up the accessory dwelling unit. I mean, accessory dwelling unit ordinance changes is actually an example of a positive shift in our last couple of years. And I think Fort Lauderdale doesn't allow it yet. So, I mean, Broward County does, but Fort Lauderdale doesn't. And it's an easy way to do small incremental increases in density that allow people access to affordable housing. A couple of other things that we find very important, because our primary resident profile is earning less than 50% area and median income, which is very hard to. There's very few, buildings that and projects that provide for this. One of the big things is parking. Even though there has been movement towards reducing parking requirements for affordable housing, in Miami, you have to be in a TOD, say, to really benefit from it. If you get 50% reduced, but you don't get really enough, we're having to put in stackers and a 4-story building on an infill lot that's going to cause our cost per unit to go in an extraordinary way. And probably no one's going to really, very few in our profile that we've done the studies on show that they will actually own a car because it's in a good location so that's another issue. And another very specific thing for me is the flexible development of regarding unit size. I think unit size in the downtown core, for example, in Fort Lauderdale, you can get less than 400 square feet, though I think they just changed that to restrict people from getting it. And in several transit-oriented corridors or development areas, you can also get concessions on the size of units. But that's just not how, speaking to this idea of the organic evolution of cities, that's just not how it typically works. Funding also, I mean, I'm hoping that we get more funding for this topic in the next year now, but generally there are very strict requirements from banks and funding organizations that drive program, and in some cases that just simply is making it too expensive again. So these are some areas that I believe we can look at.
And Jeff, I'll provide a little bit of cover for you. Having worked at NHSSF, where we developed affordable housing in all 3 counties, Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach, I can remember a really innovative, pilot project that Broward County tested out, where they, for instance, gave 10 lots to different nonprofit builders, right, to test their capacity to build. That was really interesting. And in New York years ago, I remember the Department of Housing and Preservation Development having put out a kind of RFP for architects to design affordable housing, and that produced some really exciting, well-designed affordable housing projects. We had a couple of questions. I think Stephen Miller's was kind of, I'm not sure if it was a question comment. He says, I'm interested in why Margie and Jeffrey have not discussed steel volumetric modular construction other than Poland. What about CIMC China?
I'm sorry, for some reason I'm not hearing properly, but I think you mentioned SimSeed out of China.
China.
Yes. I'm familiar with them, and we were in discussion with them on a couple of things. So I think that they stopped producing their work in England, but now they're still in the US. But what's interesting about SimSeed is that they're actually a container fabricator, and so they can, they have experience and legs. It's quite hard in this industry to find folks who've been around for a long time. So SimSeed did, I believe, most of the Citizen M hotels. I know they did the downtown LA Citizen M Hotel, which is a high-rise volumetric modular, and I've spent a lot of time at that property during construction. So I don't know if I answered the question because I didn't fully hear it, but I covered SimSeed, I think.
I think that covers it. Yeah. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, I believe it's maybe me.
Okay. And then there was a question from Reynaldo. I don't know. I see Reynaldo is on. Let me ask a question for him. He says, given that in some locations, like Miami-Dade County, we have a complex and time-consuming RFP selection process that takes months to review and determine the team that gets selected. Could you share your experiences with this concern? Mostly, it seems that it takes a certain developer with an appetite for this extensive RFP process that delays how quick we could get projects delivered to the community, which has significant need for new affordable units. Would you share your experience with these RFP processes? And I think that applies to everyone.
Yeah, it does.
I can start a little bit maybe. So, and maybe this ties back a little bit to the previous question, but our project is in the city of Wilton Manors. So this is a small town, and I would say city of Miami Beach in a way is a small town too, maybe not as small, but I think you can make some bigger strides in small towns, maybe that are adjacent to bigger towns sometimes. The processes can be faster, making changes to things like zoning code, planning code, I would say can be easier. I won't say it was easy to necessarily work with the city of Wilton Manors because they had never had a project like this before. There was quite a bit of opposition from the community at large. Just, hey, like Margie has kind of said, not in my backyard kind of a thing. But I knew that once this thing got legs and it was coming out of the ground, and now, of course, it's a huge success, and now everybody wants to make more of this happen up there. It can be a catalyst. So I would say that there's always going to be, I think, in certainly Los Angeles, Miami-Dade County, a huge process, right? That's process driven, and I think there's a challenge to that, and being familiar with the process, of course, helps you get more work, but there's still a lot of process there. And I think there are ways to work through process. I think there are ways to work within the process, but I think it always helps. And as Margie said, we're not always the architect on these jobs. Sometimes we're an advisor. Sometimes we provide more value that way to a client. Who is the client, right? Maybe it's not always a public entity that is creating this housing. I think we have
Jason,
to always push.
Can I ask you, so so that was specifically in Wilton Manor, right? But to get back to the RFP question, right, you would be dealing with Broward County, right? So like Miami Beach would be dealing with Miami-Dade County.
Yes.
How was that relationship?
Yeah, no, and I would say that, Broward County was a process as well, for sure. Yeah.
Well, the RFPs are always a challenge, and it's like, it's getting even more frustrating because we sit there and it's like, we've done 10,000 units of housing. I mean, we've probably done, 7,000 of those in affordable housing. We haven't done, all of them in Miami-Dade, but we're getting more and more challenged that for some reason in these RFPs, it's starting to become so siloed or so hard to break through, because you're now getting this challenge. Well, have you done affordable housing in Miami-Dade County?
Right.
Have you done affordable housing in Miami Beach? Have you done affordable housing in Miami Beach on Marseille Drive? Have you done affordable housing on Marseille Drive and Miami Beach on a corner lot? Have you done it, within it's getting really wild from that standpoint. And to be quite frank, there needs to be some sort of pool or some broader, I think, and this is why I know Herman, we talked about this the other day, is like some sort of affordable housing design leadership institute that can really be a bridge, a level of support, because as Margie and Jason are articulating, is that in a lot of cases, just like us at Brooks Scarpa, we are being leveraged at the beginning of the project. 90% of the project's design usually happens in the first 10% of the project before an architect is even brought on. And there can be challenges that are just not really thought about. There could be financing issues that aren't really thought about. And so, especially in Miami-Dade, and I appreciate, Ronaldo, you asking the question, and how you doing, by the way. It's been a while, but even Ronaldo and I, we working through the challenges of sea level rise and what we're going to be dealing with in South Florida. We don't want to be putting affordable housing where folks are going to be in a vulnerable standpoint. How do you begin to work through all of these? I mean, that is these RFPs are part of the problem, but it's almost a death by 1,000 cuts. It's all the above that are kind of stuck behind. And I think that's where architects, as has been discussed on this panel, really need to come to the forefront and be at the table and be a reservoir of expertise for our communities.
So sorry to interrupt everyone, but we're running over, and I know Hernan, and I want to say I forgot to mention one of our other great committee members, and Tim Blair. I know Tim was on. I hope he's still on, but thanks.
Tim is still on.
Yeah, thanks,
So
Tim. And then Hernan, maybe, I don't know how long
I can wrap up with a couple of just a couple of slides.
Comments. Okay.
So first of all, I
Good.
just wanted to thank our stellar panelists, Margie, Jason, Jeffrey. Your mom would be proud. Thank you so much for your insights, for sharing your amazing design work with us. I think it sounds like we might have to bring you back in some way, or try to engage with you all in some way. We had an open invitation from Jason. We certainly hope to have Jeff back. Margie, if maybe there might be an opportunity to visit the site or something while it's getting built, or for our students. I don't know.
To take you on a tour locally or to LA, whatever is up.
There we go. There we go.
Both would be great.
I wanted to thank everyone for attending this. Basically, I'm not sure that I even need to share the slides, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's okay not to.
So we do have a PowerPoint presentation. We've kind of summarized a lot of the work that the committee has done over the last year, starting with the conversations and workshops surrounding both housing and mobility. And over the course of the year, we were able to engage a wide facet of architects, different professionals from throughout, South Florida, in some really engaging conversations. And over the last couple of months, we decided to, we met back up with you to decide how we're going to continue to move forward. So this is one of the first kind of, what are we calling these? The housing talks, right? We talked about
Housing
a
mobility
series,
talks, yeah.
but,
We still have to talk about mobility.
Housing talks, and so we will. This will be the first of several. It's going to be additional programming. We're looking forward to having some exhibits in the summer of, an exhibit in the summer of 2020, surrounding specifically questions of redlining and zoning in Miami as barriers to design, right? And we'll have additional programming throughout the year. So thank you all for attending. We hope that you continue to attend. We're gonna send out, I think there's a link to the report somewhere that people can check out if they haven't already checked out.
We will be posting the recording of the program.
Yes.
And also, if you send me a PDF of your slides, Hernan, we can include that. We'll be sending the link out for that, and it'll be on our website in a few days.
Excellent.
I just wanted to say, all of you who attended will receive an email that will have the link in it, and it'll have a short survey. We're always looking to improve our programming. This was fabulous, but if you have ideas for other programs, we'd certainly love to hear them. So look for that email from me, and it'll have those two things in there.
Thanks, Colleen.
Thank you, everyone.
And thank you, everybody. Thanks to the committee, and looking forward to seeing all of you at our next program. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Take care. Bye.